It's a pleasure to be here in this ocean dialogue dedicated to discuss seabed mining in the context of the G20 process within the presidency of Brazil in this year. So we have for the first time an ocean group of engagement of civil society dedicated to the ocean in G20 is an official group. And we are here in a strategy to listen to the world. The Ocean Dialogue was planned to give floor to different perspectives, different topics, so that we could create a listening, a hearing process to feed the discussions and feed the final document that will be submitted to the leaders of the G20 countries and regions. So that's why we are here in these special moments to discuss deep sea mining in this iconic place, iconic place, iconic place, iconic place, iconic place, iconic place, Elza Moreira, Marcelino de Castro, ambassador of the President of the International Seabed Authority.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Well, I'm very honored to address this meeting at the G20 Ocean Dialogue. Jamaica hosts the organization, the guardian of the ocean, which is considered common heritage of humankind. It's a great responsibility, and I say throughout the commitment of one. Under the guidance of President Brazil has its efforts to promote the conservation and sustainable use of the oceans and to address the challenges faced by the communities whose livelihoods depend on them. During its presidency of G20, Brazil has prioritized oceans as one of the four main topics of the Environment and Climate Sustainability Working Group, thus following the footsteps of the last two G20 cycles under the presidencies of Indonesia and India. Within the oceans agenda, we proposed three main topics: marine spatial planning, coastal and ocean management, ocean-based climate actions in nationally determined contributions, ENDCs, and climate action plans. And finally, mobilization of resources for ratification of the agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity of areas beyond national jurisdiction, BBNJ. The G20 brings together the world's major economies. Its members represent 85% of global GDP, 75% of the international trade, and 2/3 of the world's population. Through the G20, we can voice a strong message in favor of the conservation and sustainable use of ocean resources. All have a role to play in building this message and amplifying it, not only governments, but also civil society, academia, traditional communities, indigenous peoples, coastal populations, and industry. From this perspective, the Brazilian presidency of the G20 innovated, including the Oceans 20, as a civil society engagement group. Its objective is to ensure the effective participation of civil society in the debates about oceans in the G20. Oceans 20 has organized several oceans dialogues around the world. Today's Oceans Dialogue, however, is special. For the first time, it will be dedicated to promote a dialogue about environmental, economic, and legal aspects of deep sea mining. Brazil has a say in this matter. Since the foundation of the ISA, Brazil has worked for the institutional strengthening of the organization and for the full accomplishment of its mandate. Our expectation of occupying leading position at the ISA is legitimate and consistent with our capacities. Distinguished participants. However, to fully realize its mandate, ISA's mandate, it's essential that the ISA adopts stringent environmental positions and other regulations. These should include capacity building in the transfer of technology, transparency and accountability, a clear mechanism of inspection, compliance, and enforcement, and the fair and equitable sharing of benefits. Not least important, consultation with stakeholders is fundamental for this process. Such measures are critical to ensure that deep sea mining does not compromise the protection and that sustainable development of marine resources is achieved. The active participation of civil societies is indispensable in promoting these goals. Civil society organizations play a key role in advocating for stringent environmental standards, fostering transparency, and ensuring that the benefits of marine resources are shared equitably. Their involvement helps to hold authorities accountable and ensure that the voices of diverse stakeholders are heard in decision-making processes. As we move forward, it's imperative that you continue to engage and empower civil society alongside international bodies like the ISA and others to safeguard our marine environment and use its resource responsibly and sustainably. Together, we can ensure that our oceans remain a vital source of life and prosperity for all. Finally, I would like to express my appreciation to Dr. Alexander Tura and all his team for all efforts to promote the ocean dialogues. Please be sure that the Ocean 20 efforts are making an important contribution to our work at the G20 and most importantly, to the oceans agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Elza Moreira Marcelino de Castro, for the inspirational words and the powerful words that put us on the track to the future together. So this is really important. So let's start. I will present very short some slides to introduce Oceans 20, and it's interesting that we are using oceans in plural because although ocean literacy says that we have one big and integrated ocean, in the geopolitical aspects, we understand that we have different oceans and we need to capture that aspect when we communicate about the ocean. We have an integrated ocean, but with peculiarities in different regions that should be considered. So that's why we are calling Oceans 20. So please, could you please share the presentation, Monique? It's already there? It's not here yet. Yes. So Oceans 20, G20 engagement group of civil society dedicated to the ocean within the framework of the G20 Brazil and the G20 Social, which is a very important innovation Brazil created to incorporate civil society participation and inputs for the leaders of the G20 countries and regions. So I will move on to the next slides. Next one. Yes, so we are talking about the ocean and its importance. So I will not go into detail here, but G20 is also, the ocean is especially relevant to G20 countries because 40% of the coastline of the world is linked to the G20 countries and regions. No. Back. Yes, thank you. They are responsible for 80% of global carbon emissions and 75% of global trade, which goes and comes through the ocean. So to work in that perspective, we need to have an integrated and holistic approach, considering the ocean as a socio-ecological system. There are recurrent themes along the history of the presence of ocean in the G20, and then several issues were already discussed since 2019, such as marine pollution combat, especially marine litter, IUU fishing, which is illegal and unregulated fishing, international cooperation and governance for sustainability, sustainable finance, which is being a very important issue to sustain the transition for a sustainable ocean, technology development and scientific research, which is being pushed by the UN Ocean Decade for Ocean Science for Sustainable Development and Conservation, Biodiversity, Sustainable Use of Oceans, and accelerated the transition to a sustainable and resilient blue economy. So this is are examples of issues or themes that are being discussed within G20 regarding the ocean. So in 2024, we created this, based this ocean group of engagement, based on the work that started in Indonesia and India with one panel and then one day, and now we have one working group of civil society in Brazil. And the idea is that we keep the moment so that we go for the next countries with this into mind. It's not changing here. Can you change for me? Yes. Oceans 20 is linked to the G20 priorities, the Brazilian priorities, which is social inclusion and fight against hunger and poverty, bringing resilience to this. Energy transitions and fight against climate change and reform of global governance institutions. So we are also talking about different levels of hierarchy or institutional arrangements that are relevant so that the transition for a sustainable ocean could occur. This includes International Seabed Authority, UNESCO, UNEP, and other institutions. And then related to the environment, we have some other issues like climate action and resilience, social equity and justice, which has a strong relationship with the ocean, health and conservation of ocean ecosystems and biodiversity, scientific, technological and innovation development, and governance and international collaboration. And also several other action points that we are considering in the process, and you can have access in the webpage of Oceans 20 in the internet. This represents what we are talking about. We are talking about the ocean as a transformative agent of society, of humankind, considering that SDG 14, the one with the fishing side, has strong relationships with all other SDGs. And considering that we can transform the world through the ocean, from considering the ocean. That's the idea. And to create, as I said before, to create a process, a hearing process, a global hearing process related to the G20, we created these ocean dialogues to have inputs to produce the communique, which will be the document that will be submitted to the leaders of these countries and regions. We have a roadmap. We had in March the inception meeting, in July the midterm conference, and in September we are planning the summit. We also have an opportunity to be in the meeting before the summit of the leaders in November with the G20 Social Summit, which will be another innovation of Brazil. This is a detailed roadmap. I know I'm not going into details here, but to show that there are several complexities and the process consider different moments where we can interact with the people that will be in dialogue with the leaders. For example, we had in July 2 opportunities to present recommendations of Oceans 20 to the Sherpas of different working groups and to the leaders that are representing the finance track within G20. So we had the opportunity to talk to them, to interact with them, and this is another novelty. We have some legacies. We wish to have some legacies from this Oceans 20 process in Brazil. First of all is to create a formal group of engagement of civil society, and this is done. We did that. The second one is to identify the Oceans 20 counterparts, because globally we didn't have this community related to the G20 mapped already. So one of our goals is to map the stakeholders from different sectors so that we can invite these stakeholders from different countries with their different perspectives to participate. This is a legacy of Oceans 20. And the other one is to keep the process going, or transforming a moment into a process. So that we have in the next troikas, under the presidency of South Africa next year and US in 2026, the oceans there. That will be a very important legacy. These are the co-conveners of Oceans 20, the UNESCO Chair for Ocean Sustainability in the University of São Paulo, the Brazilian Biodiversity Fund, the National Institute of Oceanic Research, Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, United Nations Global Compact, and World Economic Forum. So we are together organizing this process. And we have knowledge partners like Rise Up, Mar Adentro, and WWF, which are supporting us in different dialogues with society. And that's the idea. So if you would like to have more information about Oceans 20, we have this webpage. You can scan the QR code or go directly to the internet and see what's there. We have more than 30 ocean dialogues being conducted around the world on different topics. And this is amazing because we are having lots of inputs as here. In the end of this meeting, we will prepare a policy brief capturing all the recommendations, and we are going to circulate it with you. That's why we have outside list, so that you can put your email there, because we had a problem with the QR code in the printed invitation, and people couldn't get there. So please leave your email address in the document, in the spreadsheet out there, so that we can reach you after this meeting. So that's the point. So thank you very much. And without further delay, I would like to invite my dear friend, Luciana Yokoyama Xavier, from the UNESCO Chair for Ocean Sustainability of the University of São Paulo, which will be the chair of the first panel, which is entitled Environmental Aspects of Deep Sea Mining. So Luciana, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Hello, everybody. Good morning. We are very happy to have you here today with us. I can just put the mic down instead of staying. So thank you for your presence today. And it's my great pleasure to kickstart the discussion of our ocean dialogues. And in these sections, we'll discuss the environmental aspects of deep sea mining. For many years, the deep areas of the ocean were considered void, inhospitable spaces where life was not thought to flourish. However, with our advancements in science and industry, we have discovered that there is a completely different reality down there. The deep sea ecosystems, including those that are targeted for deep sea mining activities, such as abyssal plains, hydrothermal vents, and seamounts, they actually thrive with life. These ecosystems house animals with incredible adaptations for surviving in a dark, low oxygen environment. And well, I'm sure that being here for some time and following the discussions online, we may already have seen some very charismatic fauna, like the Dumbo octopus or the Finding Nemo anglerfish. But being so distant and difficult to access, there's still much we don't know about the deep ocean. One thing we already know, though, we know there are many, many things yet to be discovered, and that's a great challenge. And there is also a lot to understand of how these ecosystems work, function, how they relate to our life on land and to the whole planet. Despite many knowledge gaps, many uncertainties, the commencement of the deep sea mining exploitation of the seafloor in the area, which was already defined here earlier, well, it's been under discussion, and there is quite a press for that. And we wonder, what are the repercussions of starting such an activity without really know what's there and what we may lose and never find out? With this in mind, I want to invite to join me here in the front Dr. Natalia Jimenez Alegria, Deputy Legal Advisor at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Mexico. Please, Natalia, come and take a seat whenever you want. Dr. Patricia Esquete, Assistant Researcher at the University of Aveiro in Portugal. Dr. Mayla Guilhon, member of the Deep Ocean Stewardship Initiative, and Dr. José Angel Álvares Pérez, professor at the University do Vale do Itajaí in Brazil. Thank you very much for agreeing to be here with us. Our panel will work like this. We have some questions that they will react to, and after we will open the question to the audience. So all of you who are here, please feel free to interact with the panelists. And let's start. To start, I would like to ask our panelists, you have the mics on the table, to introduce yourself and explain to us how the theme, deep sea mining, and also sustainability in the area relates to your daily lives. We can start with Natalia. Okay.
Good morning, everyone, and good morning, Luciana. Thank you very much for the invitation to present today. My name is Natalia Jimenez, and I also want to thank all the organizers for putting this event together. I know it's very difficult always to find all the speakers, especially in a holiday here in Jamaica. So as Luciana introduced me, I'm Deputy Legal Advisor at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Mexico. Actually, recently, until not long ago, I was a delegate in New York, so that's why I know many of the colleagues here. That being said, we do the legal work, the coordination for the Mexican position in terms of here at the International Seabed Authority. And that, as it sounds, it's quite a lot of work because there's many ministries to coordinate. So we're the voice outside, but also there's many voices inside Mexico that we need to coordinate and to speak with just one voice.
Hello, everyone. I'm Patricia Esquete. I work at the University of Aveiro in Portugal. I'm very honored and thrilled to be here speaking in front of all of you. I'm a deep sea researcher. I do biodiversity and ecosystems in the deep sea. That's what I'm studying. And I'm focusing my research in the environmental impacts of deep sea mining. So this is very much related to my work right now. In addition, I'm co-leading the Minerals Working Group of the Deep Ocean Stewardship Initiative, which is a network of different scientists and other experts in deep sea research and in deep sea, aiming to bring the scientific knowledge, the scientific discoveries to negotiations like these ones with the aim of promoting ecosystem-based management. Thank you.
Patricia. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Myla Guillon. I'm Brazilian, so for me it's a very special opportunity to be here, having these important discussions with you all. I would like to thank Luciana, Turra, Monique, and the whole team for really organizing this nice event. It's a great honor to be here. And thank you, all of you, for taking the time of this holiday today to be here listening to what we have to say. Thank you so much. Yeah, I am Myla. I am here representing today the Deep Ocean Stewardship Initiative, as well as Patricia. And well, basically what I would like to share with you all here today is a little bit about my experience working with my object of the PhD which was actually to explore challenges and opportunities for an ecosystem-based management within the deep sea mining regime of the ISA. So here today, most of the things that I hopefully will bring to you are aspects of management and a little bit of what can be called like good governance practices according to ecosystem-based management. So I hope we have very fruitful discussions. Thank you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Angel Perez. I am oceanographer. I work for the University of Vale do Itajaí. This is in the south of Brazil. And I have dedicated quite a lot of my career to deep sea studies, which is kind of difficult in Brazil. But I started off with deep sea fisheries and all the problems that are involved in managing fisheries in that kind of environment. And that led me to be very much interested in deep sea ecology as a whole. And I got involved with international programs and the Census of Marine Life and others that came. It even had the opportunity with the Brazil-Japan consortium to dive in the Shinkai submersible in deep areas of Brazil. So that was quite a thing for my life. But then I got involved also in collaborations with the Brazilian Geological Survey to helped to get the proposal of Brazilian exploration contract in the Rio Grande Rise for cobalt crusts at that point, and that got me involved with the issue of deep sea mining. Then after that, I kept my studies on deep sea in different international processes, and not only being able to produce knowledge with a lot of colleagues around the world, but also be able to participate on this debate. So I'm very, very grateful to be here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. We have 2 mics, so you can use 2 and 2 to make it easy. And thank you very much for being here again. I think we can see that we have diversity. We have some people working with biology, governance, and also science to policy, right? Science policy interface. And Natalia here representing also decision makers. And for us to start, I would like to first have a broader discussions about sustainability in the area. Then we go into deep sea mining, we dive deep. And I would like to start with Natalia and ask you, what, in your perspectives, are the challenges in promoting the sustainability of the area?
Thank you very much, Luciana. And as you were rightly saying, my perspective will be from the policy and law of the sea perspective, because that's what we do, and in our coordination, that's also some of the challenges that we face. Of course, as parties to UNCLOS, we take our obligations very seriously, and also, all the audience here is very familiar with Part 12 of UNCLOS. And from our reading also, there's the obligations are clear, but on the same hand, what we sometimes lack as policymakers are sufficient tools, and I'm referring specifically to scientific research. For policymakers to be able to make a decision and to have a coherent practice and policy within our system, but also as a foreign policy, it's important to have enough scientific knowledge. It may seem obvious, but of course this knowledge will allows us not just to make decisions, but also to see whether we need special mechanisms to protect, to promote, or to foster that protection. And that's one of the challenges, because also, especially I will say for developing countries, and even in Mexico, of course, it's a big country. We do have many oceanographers, scientists, etc. But still, the challenges and the reality seem to be very broad, and sometimes we still need more. We need more knowledge. Again, Mexico is a big country. It's almost 9,000 kilometer coast. So there is a broad diversity, biodiversity, and it's important for us to promote that sustainability and hoping to learn more tools from the scientists in the table. Thank you.
Okay, so Patricia, can you share with us your perspective?
Yeah, from a scientist perspective, like letting alone the management aspect. So as a scientist, for me, the biggest challenge is the resource itself we are talking about. We are talking about a non-renewable resource that happens to be also the sustain of the whole ecosystem. So we need to think about it as, so the nodules, and in the case of the hydrothermal vents, the vents themselves, the minerals themselves are the sustain, at the very basis of the ecosystem, of how the ecosystem functions. Many species, or most of the species, do live on top of these nodules, on top of this crust, on top of the vents. So because it's not renewable, it's very hard to think how we are going to manage in a sustainable way. So it cannot be, for a start, from my perspective as a scientist, I studied ecosystems, it cannot be sustainable if you remove the resource. So that's the way we think. It's very challenging. It will be very challenging to try to protect an ecosystem that you are going to destroy. And then you, on top of that, it's not only not renewable, it's not coming back, it's not, the ecosystem will not be the same after, for sure. On top of that, we need to think about the deep sea ecosystems as a very, very slow ecosystems. They have slow recovery, and that's a challenge for management. The metabolism rate, the biological processes, the growth of the animals themselves is very slow. And the way the ecosystem comes back, the pace as the populations grow is very much slower. So many things that we know about management in the shallow waters is just not applicable to the deep sea. And that's why it's very challenging, as she was saying. Indeed, the knowledge gaps, the lack of knowledge on how these processes work is a big challenge for management.
Thank you very much. Professor Angel, if you want to complement also from the scientists.
Yes, I think Patricia covered a lot, but I would like to say that a lot of the sustainability issue has to do with the standards that science can produce, the thresholds, the biological thresholds that science can produce to guide this exploration. And these standards are, of course, the science has increased a lot. There's an increase in scientific activity in this area, and we know much more now than we used to know some time ago, but still it's a very small proportion of the area that these minerals are distributed and these ecosystems are distributed. And so we are making lots of generalizations about what we learn in these small areas to the whole area, and hoping that these generalizations are going to work. And there's a lot of expert opinions that are guiding this. So what I'm just trying to say is that when this exploitation really starts, there will be site-specific problems, site-specific situations that I just don't know if our general knowledge will be specific enough to guide this adaptive management, say.
Okay, then Myla, can you please share your thoughts with us?
Thank you, Luciana. Yeah, so actually, from my side, I would like to bring a little bit of this discussion of sustainability more to perhaps, as I said, management or governance. So I would actually start asking, what is sustainability? And when we talk about deep sea mining specifically, what sustainability can look like? And more than that, here we are discussing sustainability in the area, and we know that now with the ISA or the mining regime is not the only one which has an instrument affecting the area. We also now have the BBNJ agreement, which has been discussed and finalized. The negotiations have been finalized, but the BBNJ agreement would also encompass the area. So I put here a little bit of the question on how we can ensure sustainability having in mind the coherence that is needed between these different discussions and between these different instruments. Would sustainability from the ISA perhaps perspective or from the mining activities perspective be the same as the sustainable use as foreseen for the BBNJ agreement? So I think, well, there are no barriers in the ocean, and we basically need to have a harmonization, I would say, between the different regimes and between the different instruments, so we can actually work towards the same outcomes, I would say.
Thank you very much, Myla. And from what I understood, maybe you can continue it for the next questions. So there is one of our challenges is actually to integrate instruments that are ruling over the area. What would you say are the other major concerns regarding deep sea mining and environmental aspects of deep sea mining?
Yeah, so continuing in the direction of what has been put here before, we basically still lack a lot of knowledge. So as Professor Angel just mentioned, we are starting to learn about how the specific areas of the deep ocean actually work. But what I would like to pose here as some other concerns is that we are not dealing in the ocean with deep sea mining. We have other activities going on and other activities who cause different levels of the impact to the marine environment. So it's really important to have in mind cumulative impacts, right? Because perhaps we have an idea of what deep sea mining could cause, but what about that in combination, for example, with climate change? Or with many other things that we don't really know yet about the deep ocean. So I would say that it's one important concern is about cumulative impacts, but also about learning more on the dynamic and functioning of deep sea ecosystems, and more than that, how we as human beings and as a society are actually benefiting from the services that the deep ocean provide to us. So I think we don't have yet a good idea about that, and we are risking perhaps losing something, missing something that is very beneficial to us, and that perhaps we don't even know that is connected to us, and that we can impact and lose something.
Thank you very much. Professor Angel, do you want to complement?
I really just want to complement what Naila says, giving you just one example. A month ago, I think, maybe 2 months ago, there's a paper published by Andrew Sweetman, who's a Scottish researcher. We had the pleasure to work with in the I-Atlantic project in this last few years, who uses landers with us underwater equipment to measure oxygen consumption in the seafloor. And he's done that around the Atlantic to know how this seafloor ecosystem works. And he's used that in the nodule field in the Pacific. And as a surprise, they found out that the oxygen was being consumed by the sediment, but was also being produced by the sediment. So they first thought that was some malfunctioning of their equipment. And they repeated that, and they tried that on ship, and that was consistent. So they found out that there is oxygen production in the nodule fields in the Pacific, which they tried to rule out what could be producing oxygen. They could find out that this is not biological. There was no organisms doing that. And they came up with a hypothesis that the nodules are charged. They have like some voltage equivalent to an AAA battery. That's what they say. And through that, they could, through electrolysis of the seawater, that could be the source of the oxygen production. So this is a hypothesis. It needs to be proved. But can you imagine how that would change our debate here? If we find out that the ocean that's being deoxygenated by climate change and these extensive nodule fields are actually producing oxygen on the deep sea floor, I think that changed the whole entire debate here. So that's just a compliment I wanted to make here.
Okay, thank you. So Natalia, maybe you can share some other perspective with us.
I'll try, because that has been quite comprehensive, and thank you so much for sharing. I think I will go, a lot has been said already about the importance of research and all of the information that we still don't know. And I will go, as I said, one step extra, and that to talk about the importance of capacity building in developing countries, because even though this research is being done, it's not accessible to everyone in different countries. And we talk a lot about, again, this is my policy, legal perspective coming up, but we talk a lot about the principle of the human heritage of humankind, and all of what's in the seabed also being part of all the countries who are members and in general humankind, but we don't have the right access. So it's also important, and that's one of the challenges that we see, that's important to build that capacity, especially in developing countries. And then on the other hand, and I think we're quite vocal about this also, it's the importance to develop a legal framework in parallel, as there is this research, of course, because again, from a legal perspective, it's important to, when we protect, it's important to have strong protections, and also to develop in the framework of UNCLOS. And together with the a legal framework comes enforcement, and it's also important to think about how are we going to enforce once we have those rules. That would be from my side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And because you are like very nice panelists and are really sticking to your time, we actually have time for Patricia to share your thoughts if you want to complement or react to any comment, or we can just go to the other questions. It's up to you.
You can.
Okay, so the other questions is about the knowledge gaps to be filled in deep sea mining. It's good that we are starting with scientists, but I would also like to provoke you to think about knowledge. So we are in the middle of the ocean decade, it's the ocean science decade, but at least I see, or I hope for, a change in the science itself to incorporate and value and, well, bring other knowledge systems to the table. So, of course, for deep sea, this is also a challenge, I think, because at least like in my country, I'm Brazilian, people are quite not really they don't really relate to the sea. Our ocean literacy is a movement that's starting, but we've been for many times looking for our Amazon, which is like, of course, a national treasure. But this made us not, at least from my point of view, not to really look at the sea and really connect with it as a society. So also bringing society and bringing other knowledge to the table is a challenge because, well, we don't really foster it to really happen. What would you think are the knowledge gaps needed to be filled for deep sea mining and sustainability, whatever, how we define this sustainability, which is also a challenge for what I see, to the discussion?
Well, as we have been saying, knowledge gaps come in the conversation again and again and again when we talk about sustainability, which is, as you were saying, challenging or maybe not even possible. When we talk about management, there are knowledge gaps. So it's really, it's really knowledge gaps come again and again in the conversation. But there are things that we do know. So I could kind of summarize what we know and what questions that knowledge pose, actually. So first of all, we don't know the most basic things in areas of nodules, areas of nodules such as the CC said. A recent study, just one of the conclusions is that we still have to discover over 90% of the species living in the Clarion-Clipper fracture zone, which is most of the living beings in there. So that's a very, very big knowledge gap and poses a lot of other challenges because the knowledge of the biodiversity is the most basic thing. If we don't know what lives there, we cannot know how the ecosystem functions, how it will recover after an impact, how to apply management tools. So that's the very basic. On the other hand, in the Vents ecosystem is perhaps one of the best, one of the best known or well-known ecosystem in the deep ocean. So we know a lot about them, but we don't know about the inactive vents. So we know quite a lot, or relatively quite a lot, about active vents, but not inactive vents. And the inactive vents will be the ones, they're largely ignored because they are not that beautiful or not that interesting, because the processes are not that, scientists have not been that interested in that, but we don't know that much about them, or almost nothing. And the mining, if that occurs, that will occur in the inactive vents. A very big question mark is what will happen if you actually mine an inactive vent, because some research indicates that it could be reactivated, completely changing the system and the ecosystems around. So we do know things, but we don't know others. And there's the variability in the CCZ, for instance. We know that there's a high variability in terms of ecosystems, but we don't know how this variability in space and in time, actually in space and in time, how the ecosystem vary with time along the year, along the decades, so that how any impact would affect that ecosystem, how again they will recover, the capacity of recover. So basically, we don't know the basis, so that we cannot know the resilience and the recovery. There's also, we need to understand that there have been a few attempts to do test mining, to test mining equipment with more or less success. But the problem here is that if we don't know exactly the baseline, if we don't know how the ecosystem functions in the first place, it's very difficult to understand what has been the change after that test, after that action. So that's basically the most, well, we're going to say that's the big knowledge gaps, but the big knowledge gaps is just a big question mark. So how actually does the ecosystem, who is living there, how that works, and in consequence, how any impact will affect, because we don't know how it was the state of the ecosystem in the first place. And the modeling of the plumes, for instance, we don't have enough. So a model and mathematical model can predict a lot of how an impact or how the sediment plume will travel on the ocean, but a model can feed only on data that is being collected beforehand, and we don't have that data. So there's a lot of question marks on this. And about the question about, so you were asking about
different knowledge
system
systems?
knowledge, these different knowledge systems. I'm probably not the best to respond to that, but there is more and more indigenous peoples in the Pacific that are actually contributing, and they are actually getting into scientific knowledge as well. So they are becoming scientists as well. So they are holders of the scientific knowledge, and they are holders of the traditional knowledge. And not only traditional knowledge, but traditional ways of knowledge, which is another aspect of this. So we know that Pacific peoples have traditional ways of learning and traditional ways of management as well, of which together with Western science can go a way forward. So I think it's a very good time to actually bring those systems together in order to protect our oceans.
Okay, thank you very much. Myla, you were holding the mic, so maybe you can also share some thoughts about this with us.
Yeah, I wasn't preparing for this one because so much has been covered already. So just as a reminder, we are discussing now the concerns. Is that correct?
Knowledge gaps.
Knowledge gaps, great. So yeah, I'm sorry. So yeah, I just would like to share as well. I am not a deep sea biologist or ecologist, but I had the opportunity to go into a research vessel last year offshore Costa Rica, and I give my testimony basically that with one expedition, there was this expectation of perhaps finding, we were looking specifically into a species of octopus and their breeding behavior in deep sea areas, and there was the expectation that perhaps there could be another species of deep sea octopus in the same area. And now, after the whole collection, after the whole cruise, there is the expectation that we actually found another 3 other species. So every time basically that you would go in the deep ocean, I've heard and I've seen for myself right now, you would very much likely find new species that haven't been defined or described by science yet. So that per se, I would say that speaks a lot in terms of existing knowledge gaps. But I would like to speak a little bit about perhaps important knowledge gaps within the process of deep sea mining. So one knowledge gap, or what I would actually call a procedural gap, is, for example, how to make sure that we have a standardized process, for example, for the regional environmental management plans, which are such important instruments or mechanisms to ensure that whatever is happening in the deep ocean right now, and it will perhaps happen in the future when mining activities actually start, are monitored. At the moment, we only have the REMP at the CCZ really implemented, but we don't have a standardizer process to keep tracking that and to make sure that we are looking for the same things in different areas of the ocean and making sure that we are establishing measures that are fit for purpose in the different areas. And I would also like to, on a different note, speak about how it is still a knowledge gap for us, how the mechanism of benefit sharing is still a very critical knowledge gap in the process right now. So basically, we know that the activities taking place in the area should benefit the mankind as a whole, and there should be a fair benefit sharing mechanism. So I guess we are still in our very early processes of, steps of understanding what such mechanism could look like. And I guess speaking about starting actually these activities without knowing or without having the full picture of the different impacts, social, economic, that deep sea mining activities can actually bring for beyond the environmental impacts, it's quite risky as well.
Thank you, Myla. So Professor Angel, you earlier talked to us about the challenge of being a deep sea miner, deep sea researcher in such a country as Brazil. So if you would like to add and react to the comments and maybe bring us some perspective on how you see that we are advancing and like to gather this knowledge and what are the big challenges for that?
Well, I think, but just to complement what they have eloquently said, we have had a massive increase in knowledge. That has to be granted. But we are talking about a gigantic ecosystem. And the opportunities for mining will be all around. And as I said before, we have had increasing knowledge, but very limited spaces. And for example, as Myla said, the regional management plans are really a good idea because that is the mechanism to try to set aside some areas and protect them from the knowns and the unknowns, the things that we don't know. But in order to design these plans, we have to have basic information as basic as seafloor mapping, as bathymetry, which today the ocean basins are mostly, the maps we have are mostly modeled and they are mostly measured from satellite images rather than actually measured. So there are nice initiatives worldwide to get more mapping, to get more detailed information for that, and habitat mapping as well. So we have gaps in that. But when it comes to the actually mining areas, we have seen a lot of understanding of the active vents, because that's been an interest of science since the 1970s. That I read a paper yesterday, was preparing for this, that there have been more than 600 expeditions to active vents since the 1970s. So it's pretty well studied. But not the inactive vents, as she said. And the same applies to the cobalt crust areas, which have been left behind, probably because it would be the last minerals to be actually exploited. And so we need to get more information about that ecosystem, and particularly the deep pelagic ecosystem, because the pelagic ecosystem is going to be affected by mining because of the plumes generated by mining. That will affect the larval dispersal process, which is the basic for having communities colonizing areas that are not disturbed. And so we need to think about the pelagics. And of course, there's also impacts that we're expecting to happen in the pelagic fauna, in the deep pelagic fauna, which is even a larger ecosystem because it's 3-dimensional. So yeah, that's a lot of gaps.
Thank you very much. Yeah, from what I hear. So thank you for bringing this connection from the bottom to the pelagic area. Yeah, it's something that we usually kind of do not mention so much when discussing, but of course, everything is interconnected. And now I would like to ask Natalia to bring some of her perspective as a knowledge user, and you already mentioned that you need more scientific knowledge, and of course we need more other knowledge systems. How do you deal with such gaps? What would you say are your main needs for really making the decisions, or at least, yeah, having more informed decisions?
It's actually more a reflection on how to bridge the gaps between different disciplines that are involved in the decision making and also in the policy making in this field. I was listening to the co-panelists, and of course it's very enlightening, all of what they are sharing with us. And just how do we bridge the gap between the scientific community and the diplomatic community? And that's, I think, an important question that we also need to reflect upon. Of course, for Mexico being very strong believers of multilateralism, we do believe that seminars like this and other fora, of course, like the different, the authority, the UN, all of them provide a good platform for discussing and sharing this knowledge, whatever it's available out there. And also, I think we have many lessons learned from previous different processes, looking at PEGI and thinking on BBNJ, for example, and many other experiences that we had already and that we managed to have that communication between different disciplines and different countries, and to find a good solution, and at least an approach that will be a base, as the co-panelist here was saying, just to understand the reach and the importance of the phenomenon. I think that's what I have to say on this point.
Thank you very much. Well, now to close our pre-arranged questions and then open to the audience, I would like to ask you if you would like to bring any recommendations to the G20 for us from the Oceans 22, including our communique. You feel free, whoever wants to answer. Okay, thank you, Myla.
Yeah, so I think in terms of recommendation, I will touch a lot upon what Natalia brought to our discussion. I believe that one of the ways forward, or the areas for investment, let's say, in the future, is basically preparing, having like anticipatory decision making, preparing people for what I would call anticipatory decision making. So basically, having the trainings and the development of capacity of present and future, not only researchers, but decision makers and many other professionals from the areas, as Natalia was putting as well, which is so interdisciplinary and needs knowledge coming from different subjects. So basically, having these professionals, I would say, better prepared for the complexities of the world and the discussions that we've been having, as for example, in relation to deep sea mining. So people prepared really to deal with transparency, with being precautionary, with being adaptive, and highlighting the importance of having real participatory and I would say even cross-sectoral processes in which the different voices are brought to the table, and that there is a more open dialogue, I would say, with the different sectors or with the different institutions. And now connecting that with the reflection that you brought earlier about the UN Ocean Decade, I guess we are actually living a very important moment for the ocean, which is that we are in the middle of the UN Ocean Decade. And the UN Ocean Decade, it is about bringing the knowledge, developing the knowledge, but it's also about also bringing the different capacities together and develop these capacities towards what we want for the ocean of the future. So I would say that we already have the political promises and the promises within the agendas, and now I guess what we really need is to invest in the practicalities of that. And I guess therefore is really important that there is like a closer communication between the different agendas and institutions, such as, for example, the ISA, or now within the BBNJ process, within the UN Ocean Decade, so we can basically reunite the knowledge that has been created, especially now within the since 2021, when the Ocean Decade actually starts, so we can basically move forward together. But for that, I think we need to have the human capacity there ready to use all these tools and all this knowledge in compatibility with what we believe that we want for the governance of the oceans. So,
Thank you. Patricia?
So I was saying at the beginning, I'm a biodiversity scientist, so my focus is on biodiversity, and I really think, as I was saying before, it's in the very center of all the knowledge that we need in order to assess impacts, in order to be able to apply management tools. So I think one recommendation will be, so in terms of biodiversity, we know that in the CC sand, in the nodule areas, the biodiversity is absolutely mind-blowing. So I work with samples from there, and every sample is different from every sample comes with about 70 to 90% species that are not known, that I need to study for the first time, or I guess I get to name, and I get to study for the first time. And the next sample will come with another 90% of species that are not known by science, and they are different from the previous sample. So it's really quite overwhelming. In the vents, on the other hand, the biodiversity is not that high, but it's very unique and comes with adaptations that can bring genetic information, the whole genetic information that can be applied in future pharmaceuticals or even new materials, and can be very useful for us humans. So protecting biodiversity, that will be protecting the deep sea biodiversity. Many of the species have been declared actually endangered by the IUCN. So protecting biodiversity will be, I think, I believe, a very, very important recommendation to make.
Thank you.
Hello. Just to complement what Patricia said, my recommendation to G20 is that they support what I think is independent scientific initiatives in the mining areas. Because I might be wrong, and then you can correct me for that, but I'm saying that a lot of the information, of the ecosystem information that are expected in the mining areas should be coming from the contractors themselves as they monitor their operations. And I think that the gaps we are talking about here that needs to be filled needs an independent studies from independent initiatives in the mining areas. So I've seen in the mining code something like a fund. I maybe not understand that very well, but a fund that was specifically designed to technological studies. And I'm still asking myself, what are the funds for the ecosystem studies or for the biodiversity studies that would supply or would support the mining activities? So maybe it's just a misunderstanding of myself, but still, I think that the G20 should support these independent scientific initiatives.
Thank you very much. And now we are open to the audience. Alexander Tuhal will help me with the mic. So
Don't be shy.
we have one there.
There, and here, and here. First.
And before you ask the question, I'll ask you to introduce yourself, and if you want to address a specific panelist, please just indicate that.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for this amazing panel. My name is Kaya. I come from WWF International, and I'm based out of Norway. And my question actually pertains a bit to what you talked about of the different resource types. So as some of you may have been aware of, Norway has just opened a very large area, the size of the United Kingdom, for deep sea mining activities. And they're looking for crusts and sulfides, so not nodules. And you talked a little bit about like the scientific basis and knowledge bits. what we are hearing from the Ministry of Energy is they're looking to mine by 2030. So could you say something about like where the knowledge gaps are in crusts and sulfides, and perhaps the timeline, or where you see that you would have sufficient information to actually be able to address what environmental impacts would come from those activities? Thank you.
Let's collect 3 questions and then we go. Okay.
And just one more thing, our friend Trevor there, who is operating the camera, he can also focus on you from the audience. So if you just stand in the sides, he can take you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. I'm Leticia Carvalho. I'm part of the Brazilian delegation, and thank you for alluding in so many towards so many important aspects. From what I've heard, 2 elements brought my attention or captured my attention the most. One is knowledge gaps, and the other is cumulative impacts. And I think Professor Angel started to answer a little bit of my questions, but I still think I would like to see your thoughts about what do you think, for who wants to answer, the role of the test mining in being the pathway for bridging knowledge gaps. And this is, for me, my understanding, one of the mechanisms that mining code is envisioning as the opportunity to bridge the knowledge gaps. So how do you see this pragmatically? What are the limitations of this tool, and what are the advantages of this tool or of this approach? Secondly, cumulative impacts. How do you see area-based management tools coming into the space of the ISA, but also of the BB&J provisions as a solution, as a pathway as well for the harmonization of the protection and other aspects, meaning how do you reconcile disturbance and benefits? And I just want to make a general comment that in my assumption for these 2 questions is developing sustainable development is not an outcome, it's a process. We set up some targets from time to time for this process, and then we check in and we see how far or how successful we were during the period. But I don't see sustainable development as something that you reach as an outcome, therefore a process. So these 2 approaches, the task mining and the area-based management tools, are essential parts of the pathway to achieve sustainable development in certain circumstances, meaning timelines and towards certain targets. So how do you see that? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the presentations. I'm Patrice Lacaire. I'm the head of the Canadian delegation. I want to address the knowledge gaps, but also the interface between science and us delegates on the floor and how we use it. The groundbreaking revelations of the past few weeks has been this dark oxygen production. And I'm sure, as you've witnessed on the floor and during the assembly and side meetings, it's been used it's been on one side debunked, on the other side almost confirmed. If this is indeed proven, demonstrated, replicated, not only that it happens, but also quantified as, you know, what would be the effect, it would be not groundbreaking, it will be a deal breaker. So us delegates, we really need that science. And I would like your views, as this could be some discovery that would be so important as to change the way we perceive the deep seabed environment. How you see how you could bring those results and that science more quickly, and how we could collaborate to confirm that and use this. So I just wanted to, how strategize to, you know, because the research in deep sea research is challenging. It's sometimes tied to those that are doing the prospection. So how can we work together to establish a clear, solid scientific basis of that phenomenon that we could use all delegations in a consistent way? Thank you very much.
So you can volunteer to answer which questions you.
I think I can answer Kaya's questions and a little bit of Patrice's question. So I've been lucky enough to be recently in an expedition in the Arctic near Norway, studying the hydrothermal vents. And there are some of the vents in that area are quite well or more or less well studied. Many of them are undiscovered. So that expedition, the main objective of that expedition was to study the least studied active vents and also discover new ones. And how can that be an objective? It's because we know that in vent fields, on those vent fields, there are still many vents that have not been discovered and to be discovered. And we didn't find many of them that we have clues that they are there. And we still didn't find them because it's very difficult. It seems easy, but it's very difficult to actually find a vent in the deep sea that you know that is there, because we go kind of almost blind with a robot or a submersible or whatever to try to find it. So the knowledge gaps there are immense. The crust are almost never been, to my knowledge, there have not been serious studies or systematic studies in the crust over there. So there's a huge hole in our knowledge. Again, about the vents, some are well discovered, are well studied, not as well as those in other areas in the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. It's very difficult to put. It will be very difficult to put a timeline. It depends, of course, on the efforts that are made for studying them. But I would really like to remark it's quite bold, and it will be quite risky to start thinking about exploitation of those vents when we don't even know how many of them are active or inactive, because some of them are believed to be active, but as I was saying, we know that can be reactivated, and that's quite risky for the whole ecosystem. The crust, we don't know anything about them. We don't know what can be lost in terms of biodiversity, in terms of ecosystem services. So it's very difficult to put a timeline. There have been suggestions, and the best guesses, if we will have the best efforts and collaborative effort and systematic effort and a lot of resources, economic resources, maybe in about 10 years, we can start to have very basic knowledge of the vents there or elsewhere. But it's very difficult to put a timeline when there's such a huge knowledge gap. So it's very risky. And answering a little bit to Patrice's question, so that discovery is quite groundbreaking. In terms of, so we didn't know that the nodules could produce oxygen. The question now, one of the questions now is indeed how much oxygen are they producing? At the very least, they are producing oxygen that will be put available to the rest of the ecosystem, to the rest of the animals living there, to the bacteria, etc., etc. So it will be consumed by and being an important part of the chemical environment in there. So now we know that the nodules are not only the physical substrate, the physical sustain of the ecosystem, because there are species living on them and species living on the species that live on them that are very unique and they can only live on the nodules. We also know that they are producing the oxygen that shapes the whole chemical environment around, so allows other species or particular species to live and not others. So now we have one more reason to think that the nodules are essential for those ecosystems. If you take out the nodules, you basically take out the ecosystem and it's not going to come back because the resource is not renewable. Another question an important question that new discovery poses is, then if the nodules, because they have metals, they are producing oxygen, are the crust producing knowledge? Are the polymetallic crust producing oxygen as well? What about the vents, the polymetallic sulfides? Are they producing oxygen? That's something that has never been, that was not a question because we had no clue that could happen. But that's another thing that can be studied in the future. So yeah, I guess one of other recommendation, or we'll say recommendation, is to encourage and promote more studies and independent science to come up with solid answers.
Thank you, Patricia. Do anybody else want to react?
Yes. Well, first about the crusts deposits. Well, crust deposits they occur on seamounts mostly, and the question is, but there are some seamounts that do have crusts, and there are seamounts that do not have crusts, and so the question is whether what we know about seamounts is enough to manage mining or to understand what will be the consequences of mining on the crust deposits, or if the areas, seamount areas that have crust, some have a sort of different ecology than the ones that do not have crusts. So I guess that's the most important question right now for that mining exploration. And the question about the dark oxygen, well, I'm sure that Andrew Sweetman is looking for funds now to go back there again and get more information on, more data on the area. And well, I would think he would get, but maybe some philanthropic organizations are eager to fund him to go back there and get more information on that. But yes, I'm sure there will be more news about this very soon, I suppose. And about the question that Priscilla asked, well, the test mining is very important. I mean, of course, some scientists say that we will only know about what will actually happen to the ecosystems when the exploitation gets started. But test mining is better than nothing. We have been able to find some of the elements that may be very important for this managing process. For example, there was there was an experiment like 26 years ago in the Pacific that there was a recent paper that was back there to see if those changes were still there, and they found out that they were. So 26 years after the disturbances, it's still the disturbances are still findable. You can still find them there, and so meaning that the ecosystem has not recovered from that disturbance. So yes, the test mining is really, really important, as well as the space-based measures. As I said, that's the only way we can set aside things that we don't know that's going to happen. But
thanks. I'm just going to add very briefly to what Angel just put in respect to the test mining and the area-based management tools. So I agree that the testing mining or that will result in the development of an EIA it's really important in the process. However, as the current practice has been for the perhaps for EIAs who has been submitted to the ISA as a result of test mining, they haven't been much encompassing in terms of baseline information that has been added to it, and I believe that perhaps we would need to have that much strengthened in order to actually move forward, towards exploitation regulations. And more than that, for exploitation regulations, we need to have a bit more security in terms of what's going to be the standard and guidelines that will be contained within the environmental impact assessment processes to take place during exploitation. So I agree that is really important, but I don't think that we are quite there yet, even for exploration. So that process needs to be much improved without speaking for exploitation. And in terms of the area-based management tools, I believe that REMPs are also a very good start, but also it's possible to number a few flaws on the process as it happened right now. So it's, for example, is not so, it doesn't bring so much of this sectoral dialogue with other uses of the environment within a region, which could bring us more information about cumulative impacts. And once we are moving towards exploitation, that is something that is critical, which will be to make sure that we know what, which impacts are coming from what activity, and more than that, if they are put together, what could be the results of that. So I think they are very necessary, but there are definitely much space or room for improvement within the process as well. So.
Thank you. Natalia?
Just a brief comment on area-based management tools and environmental impact assessments, because there was also a brief reference to BB&J, and not to mix two things, but just to, in that reference to BB&J, just to say that the result of those intense negotiations were procedures for both area-based management tools and environmental impact assessments. And of course, those procedures still need to enter into force, and many countries will need to harmonize the legislation, so it's also an important step when we talk about regulation and how to actually implement those procedures that were achieved during negotiations. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you have any questions for the audience?
I see here
And
here. Okay.
also.
Hey, thank you so much. And to the panel, it's very informative. My name is Catherine Nyakoy. I'm from the Kenya Mission to the United Nations in New York. I'll be speaking in my capacity as an individual. So I have a question, and I also have a few comments. The question is, how much more time for research? Secondly, how much scientific research is enough? And for the sake of my people, the people of Kenya who I represent, the advancement over time has not waited for complete research. I believe, there is no time we'll get to a place where we say we have complete scientific research. I don't think any of us today regrets that we can fly despite the carbon emissions and be here from all parts of the world. But flying started without all that sufficient research. But as we started, we worked better ways of sustainably doing what we do. Just an example. There is an airplane somewhere that went missing several years back that has never been found, that is thought to be somewhere in the deep. So how much time would we wait to say that then we sufficiently have scientific research that would enable us to start? I don't think it's practical. But that said, it's important that there is that balance. The balance of working the scientific research and sustainably using what is able to bring benefits to people. One of the panelists talked about independent research. I would like to add to that, especially from the country I come from and the region that I come from, inclusive research. It brings us to the issue out of the science and to an issue called trust. Because I come from a region where we are very underrepresented. And it's something that we don't speak enough about, that with that research, and I know, well, it's nobody's really obligation to take care of our research, but there are historical aspects that are important to take into account. But then from the issue of the principle of the common heritage of mankind, in every process that deals with the area, then the universal inclusion of all peoples must be there in the processes, the decision making, and the decision taking. So the aspects that are needed to go into the decision making and the decision taking really need to firmly take into account that everyone is there. Kenya is not sufficiently represented in the research currently going on. Africa is not sufficiently included. And therefore, it becomes easier for most of us to say, let us all start in there and we will work it out as we go. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question. First of all, let me refer to what was just said by the Kenyan delegate here. We come to the concept of the humankind. It's the seabed is a common heritage of humankind. So this leads me to my first thought was that because of this concept, Brazil has been, since the beginning, favoring a clear mechanism for distribution that should be fair and equitable from all the resources in the area, the activities in the area. The point is, for us to have an equitable and fair distribution of the benefits, and we understand that there is financial and non-financial benefits, we need to evaluate how much cost the service, the ecosystem service. This is fundamental, not only for distributing the benefits of the area, the benefits of the activities, but also to establish a mechanism for payments. So because without enough resources, enough payment, we cannot also distribute, and you cannot invest to have financial and non-financial benefits. However, considering the gaps in science, consider that science is a cumulative process, and it's a process, is a permanent process actually. So there is no frontier, no barrier, no end. So how do you see the best way to approach this? Because we understand, based in proposals that were made, especially by Germany and others, that we need to incorporate the externalities, the environmental externalities in our financial mechanism. This is, for me, one of the main aspects, because it will be through this mechanism that will show how activities in the area, mining and other activities, will be shared equitably. So this is, I think this is a big, big challenge, because as far as you know, we don't have enough knowledge. So as far as you know, we need to invest much more in science. And I think that Kenny is very, I think that she touched on an important thing, this how all countries contribute also to this effort to have enough knowledge and to have a pool of scientists working for the same objective. This is my first question. The second question has to do with the narrative that has been very wide, it's very widespread narrative, that the mandate of the UNCLOS and the 1994 agreement for the ISA is exclusive and unique. However, when we see that activities in the area will disrupt the biodiversity, for example, or even fishery, navigation, it's clear absolutely that we have to have a high level of coordination and cooperation with other international agreements. So, based on that, do you consider that this narrative that we have been repeating, that ISA has a supremacy in terms of regulations and in terms of the mandate to manage and supervise the area, does it apply, or should we eventually make some adjustments also in the language? Because the way we sell ideas depends very much on how we word them, how we express them. And I think this is important also because we realize that for us to really have a very correct approach in concerning all matters related to ocean, mining, or whatsoever, we need to create literacy. And literacy is something that we have to start very early. And it has very much to do with how we portray the situation, how we explain, and the words that we use. So this is my two questions for now. Thank you.
We have a last one, and then we go to the last round of participation in the panel.
Thank you very much, and I'm very pleased that I took the time this morning to come and be here in your presence, and I really appreciate your comments coming across many different disciplines. So I'm an indigenous Hawaiian. I live in the largest ocean on this earth. It is our home, it is our country. We have very intimate experiences, knowledge, and connections to this place, even so much so that at this body I've been introducing our indigenous genealogy that connects us with the creation of life that comes from the deepest part of the sea. The coral polyp, as we say, the ukukoako, is our eldest ancestor, and therefore we have an inherent responsibility for its care. So in just listening to some of your presentations here, I wanted to just comment and say, so we come from the deep sea, and in our perspective, this is where we are created from, but at the end of our life, we also return to the deep sea. So there is a reciprocation in our indigenous view that we come from the place that is creating us and we go back to that place. So this idea of the recycling of life is supported by who we are when we are given the privilege to be living creatures. No matter if we're humankind, perhaps we need to talk about kinkind, all creatures. We are part of nature, and then we will all essentially go back to the place of our creation, and that is an important place for us to give consideration to. Okay? And secondly, there is a need to acknowledge that refugias are an important place. There are, in our view, sacred places, and sometimes these areas of refugia are intended to be places that are in the realm of creation and of the spirits and of the gods. So in our place of Hawaii, the deepest part of the ocean is considered a refugia, a place of our creation. But so is the highest part of our mountain and in the forest where the rain is made. It is a place of refugia. We don't interrupt those systems because they are also giving us the ability to be beneficiaries of oxygen, of water that gives us life. So we leave them as sacred places, and they're identified. You don't go into them and try to figure out how it works. These are just given places that need to be given respect and sacredness. Your scientific researchers always talk about not enough, and the comment made here, not enough science, you know, and that there needs to be a cumulative kind of research for us to have a better sense and idea. And then I question whether or not the cumulative indigenous observations, experiences, knowledge, and science is not given consideration. You know, so does science have to be the only one that is intended to give cumulative information and knowledge, and that the indigenous cumulative knowledge, science, experience over thousands of years is simply put to the side as though they have no purpose. So I challenge that perhaps you need to give that inclusion of the indigenous people that have been doing this in thousands of years. And then lastly, then I would say that that we do heed to the inclusion of your discussions and at the G20 of the indigenous inclusion, because I've seen very little here in your slides, in your presentation, and I thank Patricia for making a comment about that inclusion. But there needs to be more inclusion of that in all of your discussion. So I thank you very much for.
Thank you very much. So we are closing the audience direction, and I will, I'm very sorry to have to ask you to be as brief as possible. Then we close the section, and of course we can continue the conversations in the coffee. So.
I can briefly, hopefully, comment or try to answer the representative from Kenya. First of all, thank you very much. I think that everybody should thank this call for more inclusion. As a scientist, I've learned that the inclusivity, that bringing different perspective to science, or I mean within science and apart from science, bringing different only enrich the process of producing knowledge. And so as you very well know, so I think it's a very important call to make here and probably a very important recommendation, and thank you also, Uncle Sol, for that. So about how much science on when we will have the science is a very fair question, a very fair point. We cannot know everything, or if we wait for knowing everything, that will take forever, because we don't even know everything about simple and reachable ecosystems here on land. But we don't need to know everything. We need to know sufficient. We need to know enough for decision making. And if we need, I guess if the mandate of the ISA is to protect the marine environment, we at least need to know enough to be able to apply management tools and conservation tools. And also we need to think about, I think it's a very practical point that you made. Yeah, but we can just start and learn on the way. The problem with the deep ocean is that it's not that easy, because I was saying at the beginning, every process is very slow on the one hand. On the other hand, we are talking about a non-renewable resource. So we need to be very careful in terms of what, and at least know how much can be lost in order to decide. And be very careful, because when it's lost, it's lost. It will be lost for millions of years. And so the recovery is very slow. Sometimes it will be just not possible, or not in human timescales. So there's a little bit call for caution here. So yes, I was saying we don't need to know everything. We need to know enough or sufficient, and especially because we are not 100% sure of how or what ecosystem services are going to be lost. So we know there is carbon sequestration going on the deep ocean, but it's not being quantified. The processes have not been well understood. So that carbon sequestration happening in the deep sea is a very important ecosystem service that we need to understand before before starting an activity that can jeopardize that service. So I think, yeah, we don't need to know everything. We need to know enough in order to ensure protection, and in order to ensure that we are not we are not going to lose something that we actually need as human beings.
Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to comment on that question as well, and just what Patricia says. But it got me. I remember the fishing management classes, where students tend to think that the scientists should manage because they know so much, and I just have to disappoint in saying that scientists do not manage. Management is a society decision, and what we normally do is to try to calculate risks. And for now, I guess we'll agree that the risks are very high to losing, things that we don't know. It can be very important to society. That's something we can say for sure.
I think I would like to comment on Uncle Sol's intervention or comment. I think I fully agree with the way that he put it on actually sometimes we as scientists believe that we are the holders of the truth, and that we have basically the answer to everything, and that the answer to everything should actually come for us, otherwise it's not perhaps even believable. But I think that we are slowly walking the path of really acknowledging that it's not only about science, and that the science is not, we are human beings, and as a society we are not only guided by facts, we are guided by our values, by our beliefs, and that's part of us, and that's part of what we bring to the table whenever we are agreeing or disagreeing with the decision-making process. So I think especially the BBNJ now is bringing a little bit more. I would say that it's advancing in really acknowledging the importance of bringing other narratives or other beliefs or other ways of seeing the world, and that they should be respected and incorporated into the process somehow. And I believe that there should be more space within the ISA as well to bring these discussions, and that's why or where I see that there is this important link between the different processes, institutions, so that we can actually walk the same path and leave no one behind. So,
thank you very much. Do you want to go? Okay, so I would like to thank our panelists and our audience for your brilliant questions. Of course, we have a lot of food for thought for our recommendations for Ocean 20. Well, I've learned something that I just noted that I used the term wrong with working with the Brazilian Platform for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, is that we are all decision makers in our own capacities. So it's for us, we are trying very hard to bring some very relevant discussions like this to society, and thank you very much for contributing to this. And now we have 20 minutes coffee outside for stretching out our legs, and we'll be back in 20 minutes.
Hello. Just to inform people that are online that we are reconvening in a few minutes. So ask your patience. for a while. Hello. Hello. We are reconvening after the coffee break for the second and last panel entitled Economic and Legal Aspects of Deep Sea Mining. So please have your seats while I invite my dear friend Julia Schutz Veiga, PhD candidate in international law at Nova School of Law. So Julia, the floor is yours. Julia is chairing this panel, and we will invite the speakers, introducing them. Julia, please.
Good morning, everyone. It's a bit difficult for me being here in the spotlight, but I will do my best. So, well, thank you for your presence, first of all. I feel very honored to be here, to be invited to lead this panel. Many congratulations for the organizers, first of all, to putting all together, and also many congratulations to the Brazilian government to engage with the civil society in this G20 presidency. A little disclosure, as you saw these last days, I'm part of the Brazilian delegation, but here I will speak as my researcher capacity, and I feel very honored to see some Portuguese delegates here in the audience, because I'm based there, studying and doing my PhD at Universidade Nova de Lisboa. So thank you. This session will include presentations by leading experts on economic and legal aspects of deep sea mining, with an opportunity for further discussion and exchange of views. We have just heard what science tells us about deep sea mining, and now we need to translate these environmental perspectives into legal wording in order to produce the economic development we seek. So in this sense, we should keep two legal provisions in mind: Article 1, Paragraph 1 of UNCLOS, and also Article 136 of the UN Convention for the Law of the Sea, who will establish the geographical scope and the principle of common heritage of humankind. So with this in mind, I want to call my dear friends and colleagues to join me in this panel. So firstly, I want to invite Tamara Thomas, Executive Director of Ocean Ties and Ocean Advisor to the Republic of Seychelles. Secondly, I want to call Wisnik Ponier, Minister Counselor of the Permanent Mission of Haiti to the United Nations in New York. Dr. Ana Flávia Platio, Professor at the University of Brasília, Brazil. And lastly, my dear friend Pradeep Singh, a fellow research at Institute for Sustainability in Potsdam, Germany. This implies, like this panel implies specifically or particularly talk about legal provisions and what we want for sharing non- and monetary benefits for the benefit of all humanity, as well sharing the common responsibility that all states have to protect and preserve the marine environment. So we will try today to understand better how to balance scientific and economic approach. More than that, how can we translate this to legal provisions on these challenging perspectives? So for the first round, I would love to ask them, each of you, to introduce yourself and quickly explain how these legal and economic perspectives related to your daily life. Can we start with Tamara, please?
Thank you, Julia. It's a pleasure to be here. And I think you did a really good introduction, so I won't introduce myself again. But on behalf of Seychelles, I can say that Seychelles is a big ocean state with 99% ocean and only 1% land. The ocean is the livelihood and the lifeblood of Seychelles. It contributes to its food source, livelihoods, and regulates the climate system. The nation's economy is dependent on the ocean. Just over a third of its GDP comes from fisheries. Every national decision is directly or indirectly tied to the ocean. Seychelles is extremely invested in the health and sustainability of its ocean, and by extension, the ocean at large. This is why Seychelles has protected 99% of its seagrass ecosystems and created an MPA representing 32% of its EEZ, the size of Germany, and has actively engaged in various aspects of UNCLOS, such as BBNJ and ISA. The high level of connectivity across maritime boundaries means that every time we work within our EEZ, we have to think about areas beyond national jurisdiction as well, and vice versa. Consequently, transboundary effects of areas within national jurisdiction includes both the EEZ and the joint management area that we share with Mauritius. A threat to the health of the marine environment is a threat to the economy and the livelihoods of the Seychelles people.
Thank you, Tamara. Wisnik, can you continue, please?
Thank you very much for giving me the floor, Julia. I'm very happy to be here this afternoon to participate in this very important discussion about this important topic. So as you said, my name is Wisnik Penier. I'm based in New York. I'm covered the 6 committee matters, legal matters, and I follow also the discussion about BBNG since about 2 years at New York. So I'm very honored to be here this afternoon to speak about this important topic. So as you already know, I will try to point out a lot of points about the first question. The first one is about the protection of natural resources. As you know, Haiti is located in a region rich in maritime biodiversity, must ensure the protection of its natural resources, which are vital for the livelihood of its people. So some activities such as deep sea mining can have a negative impact on those ecosystems. And so our job is to ensure that the economic activity in maritime area respect environmental standard and support the sustainable development. And the other aspect is about the economic development. As you know, Haiti seeks to improve its economy development through the exploitation of its maritime resources. So that include include only fishing, but potentially also the exploitation of underwater minerals. So there's a lot of point about legal and regulatory framework. It's also important. So to conclude of this point, the topic of deep sea mining is directly related to our daily work, I can say, as it encompasses environmental, economic, and legal aspect. They are crucial for the future of Haiti. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Ana Flávia, please.
Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank the Brazilian delegation for the invitation, for the opportunity of being here, and Alexander Tura with his team for the opportunity to be here discussing with you this morning. I'm really grateful and happy, honored to be here and meet with so many different and interesting voices. My name is Ana. I teach at the University of Brasilia. I teach international relations. And the question how this relates to my life, it's very easy. I cannot disconnect my life from my research agenda. So for me, an international relations point of view, connecting the legal aspects with the economic aspect, we can think that the ocean was very little mentioned during the Rio Summit in 1992. And we have to ask the question, why is that? Did you forget about the ocean? No, the answer was that the answer had already UNCLOS and it was fine like that. We didn't need any more regulation. And then it took us years and years to discuss and to get to a text, that's the BBNJ, and now the mining code. So from a political point of view, international relations point of view, the ocean is a very interesting subject of research because we know if it's like the last frontier and it's powerful, it's probably the future El Dorado, as many people say. And it's very difficult to regulate now because it's too late already in terms of the economic interests that are already structured around the opportunities and the economic viability of kind of appropriation of marine resources, living and non-living resources together. So very happy to be here and to discuss with you, but the key idea is that why did we forget the ocean for so long time? Why is it so hard? Why do we take 20 years to come to a text like the BNG, more than 20 years? Why do we have to spend so many years discussing if we know what's at stake? Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Pradeep.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. I would like to start by thanking the organizers for putting this together and having us all here. So thank you, Professor Tuha and team, and also the government of Brazil. And happy Emancipation Day also to Jamaica, and thank you all for being here today. So my name is Pradeep Singh. I'm a fellow at the Research Institute for Sustainability in Potsdam, Germany. And I'm here on the IUCN delegation, essentially because I'm a member of two IUCN commissions as an expert, one on the World Commission on Environmental Law, and the other one on the Commission of Ecosystem Management, so specifically working on topics on ocean law and deep seabed mining, and in that sense, supporting the IUCN delegation but also speaking to a lot of delegations and providing insights on legal, regulatory, and policy aspects of deep seabed mining. And coming from academia, like Professor Flavia, my interest has been, in the law of the sea and in international law, but also sort of asking questions on how should we interpret the convention today based on what we've learned so far. And as we've known, the convention, the negotiations took place in the 60s and 70s, but our understanding and our values have also changed since the negotiations took place. And as such, my particular approach is to try to treat the convention as a living instrument and to give it meaning in present day. And that's what inspires me to carry out further research in the law of the sea, and to provide alternative interpretations and approaches, at least for consideration as we decide on how to chart the path forward. And I guess on a more personal note, I come from Malaysia. I was born on an island surrounded by the water, and that sort of also gave me the strong connection to the ocean from a very young age, trying to understand about our relationship with the ocean, and that prompted me to learn more and study more about the law of the sea and ocean governance, so that we can all prosper as one race. Thanks.
Thank you very much for sharing this first round of question. And well, we all know that to implement the Part 11, we have a duty, is to finalize the mining code. And I'm a BB&J person, and when I started going deep into this draft text, I saw so many things going on, so many things that we need to finalize this mining code. So, and firstly, I think we need to go deeper in this balance between legal and economic aspects, and because of that, the organizers thought about this panel. So perhaps we can start with Pradeep now, from there. And our ambassador kindly reminded us a few aspects about this question in the previous panel. So Pradeep, to what extent can we calculate the cost of seabed mining in terms of externalities if we cannot elaborate adequate impacts assessments yet? Do you have some thoughts to share with us?
I have some thoughts, maybe not answers, but something to bear in mind. I think this question has come up, and in the last few years, I think due to a push from countries like Brazil, Germany, and others, we finally brought to the table the need for the ISA to consider the environmental externalities of deep seabed mining, the polluter pays principle, which we have to bring into the regulatory system. We need to understand the value of natural capital as it is untouched. So what we already benefit from the ocean in its current state, which again is not in a very good state, but we do still get a lot of benefits from natural capital of the deep ocean. And if we were to allow deep seabed mining, this is an aspect that we would need to consider, the externalities that would come from deep seabed mining. How could this impact fisheries, for example, and other themes that was discussed in the session this morning. Then comes the question of benefit sharing as well, right? Because these are all interlinked. If indeed we allow deep seabed mining to take place, and contractors are allowed to exploit the resources, who would actually benefit from this process? And that is something that we need to think carefully about, because if we don't see any returns, tangible returns, then why would we allow the activity to commence in the first place? Because otherwise you just end up with a situation that maybe a handful would benefit, everyone else would have to bear the burdens, the resources which are the common heritage of humankind would continue to deplete, and we don't really see anything in return. So that's a very important question that we need to bear in mind. The link with terrestrial mining as well, that's something that we haven't really started talking about at the ISA. How would deep seabed mining affect terrestrial mining, particularly developing countries whose economies are reliant on deep seabed mining. And we know from the convention that a system of compensation needs to be developed in order to compensate these countries, which also means then less money for benefit sharing if these terrestrial mining countries are to receive compensation. Goes back to the point that I was saying earlier, if once you go through all this, there would be nothing left, and who really benefits. And further, I think new scientific knowledge is coming out that shows, due to the connectivity of the ocean, what we do in areas beyond national jurisdiction will come to impact us in the exclusive economic zones, but also the shorelines. And this scientific evidence are starting to tell us that it's the coastlines of developing countries that stand to suffer the most due to the connectivity and the circularity of the ocean, that what we do in areas beyond national jurisdiction would impact the waters of developing states disproportionately. And so I guess, those are some of the thoughts that I'd like to share to start off. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Pradeep. We all know that he has been playing an important role as a representative of civil society in this process. So thank you for sharing your thoughts with us and helping us to finalize this. But I also want to hear from delegate if they want to share some views, because we need this balance between civil society and decision and policymakers. So maybe Tamara, do you have some thoughts to share with us about it? Because at the end, we need to have their thoughts in this.
Sure, thank you,
Thank
Julia. So I would agree with Pradeep. I mean, it really is important that environmental impact assessments are robust and are in place if any activity is to take place in the area. So I'll just read a few notes that I have on this point. Seychelles is keenly aware of how various activities can potentially affect not only Seychelles, but also the Indian Ocean and also its tuna fishery industry. This would be an area that's in need of further research to better understand what those impacts might be. We also highlight the importance of the ramps, which in our previous panel we heard some discussion about that, but those are the regional environmental management plans, and their imperative inclusion in the consideration of any application. We recall that during the LTC session in July 2024, the LTC finalized a standardized procedure for the development and establishment and review of regional environmental management plans, adopting recommendations on technical guidance for the development of ramps in support of the standardized procedure and template. This is not just a matter of standardizing procedures, but also ensuring that these plans are informing decision-making and being implemented as well as being monitored. We note here that there is some overlap, of course, with the BBNJ treaty. So we're looking forward to that first COP, but we do have to recognize that there is a connection between environmental impact assessments within ISA as well as the BBNJ. And I can stop there for now.
Thank you, Tamara, for that. And would be lovely if all the states shared those visions. Would be really nice. Well, to move on, I think we can, Professor Ana Flávia, would mind sharing with us what are the links between the economic and legal aspects of deep sea bed mining?
Yes.
It's a broad question, but...
Yeah, very broad. First of all, a disclaimer, I'm talking on my own capacity because I also teach in the Superior Defense College in Brazil and the University of Brasilia, and so I'm just sharing my opinions with you, my own opinions. First, I'd like to say that Ambassador Elsa Castro and Professor Dr. Alexander Turra mentioned about the great powers or the most powerful countries. We are talking about the G20, and it's the group of very powerful countries. Recently, one of my students finished his PhD thesis, and he worked on the concept of ocean powers. And ocean powers, he crossed the data set from different perspectives, and we included technological powers. So who are we talking to when we think about the G20 and think what we can suggest, recommend to the G20? We're talking about great ocean powers. the G20 does not include all the ocean powers. There are other countries that are, from a technological point of view, very powerful. So I think we have to look at them, because in international relations, sovereignty is important, but power is more important. The resource of power there are different resources: economic, cultural, technological, military, and so on. So looking at those powers, how do we connect legal and economic aspects? Using a framework, theoretical framework from the Earth System Governance Research Network, we can look at the architecture and agency. Architecture means what are the institutions, what has been created, what are the treaties, what is formalized, what is legally binding, for example. And agency, very easy, who are the stakeholders? And it was said here this morning, the stakeholders are from multiple origins. We have market agents and we have society agents, and then we can think of different perspectives and legitimate interests, including different knowledge systems. When we think about that, what comes to my mind is that what we've been doing here is using the best available scientific reports to tell people, to raise awareness about what are at stake. But market agents or some states, they won't listen to that because they are looking for the benefits, for the profits. And so one of my suggestions would be, from this linkage, thinking about complexity thinking about nexus. One is legal and economic, so the legal framework does not stop economic interests from thinking that they can get lots of benefits from the mining, because they will have free access to the resources and they will remain unpunished if they cause irreversible damage or serious damage to the environment. So that's game theory. It's very simple for economists in the sense that if a resource is shared, it's a common resource, it's common heritage of humankind, but it's free. The access is free. So people will try to get it. And the first arrived, first served. That's what we are living now. So if we shift the focus to the externalities, so the message to the G20 would be, if you want to exploit these mineral resources, you will have to pay a big amount of money that will be not the benefit, but your right to access. And then they would think twice before putting pressure on governments to have the mining code ready. So this is one first nexus. Just a second nexus, very quickly, the mining industry, states and companies. In international relations, we don't care where they come from. We care how they function, what they are doing, not who they are, from my perspective. So the nexus between the different regimes, the companies are saying, or the interested stakeholders are saying that they need these minerals, critical minerals, to decarbonize the economy for batteries and for ships and the digital future that we'll have. So they are making this clear nexus, ocean and climate. And this is something very important that we are doing also as a response, but I don't think we're doing it fast enough. So just to stop here with these two nexus, but final message, the legal framework is very weak, unclear, and it will encourage mining if it is not focused on externalities. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think it's really important because sometimes I have the feeling that we are always looking to sharing, for sharing benefits of the access and utilization of those resources, but sometimes we forgot about property. It's ocean commons.
So we need to have this in mind. And I don't remember like a name about minerals and this type of resource, about this topic, but just came to my mind Professor Siva Tambisetti, who is doing really great work on genetic resources and the relation with this, like access and property. So how we can reflect this into legal provisions. So thank you for reminded us with this. And UNESCO, I'm sorry if I'm saying your name wrongly, Wisnik, yeah, I'm so sorry for that. Do you have some thoughts, like as a minister counselor, do you have some thoughts about what Professor Ana Flavia just said?
Yeah, I think that is a very important topic. I'm very happy to hear your explanation about that. It's very interesting. So I have the chance to follow the discussion, for example, about the BBNG agreement. I think that one of the most important topic was the possibility to share the benefits from the exploitation of the genetic marine. So it was a very discussion topic. So I think that for some countries like Haiti, from developing country for Haiti, is very important to fight for this topic. So about the legal and regulatory framework, I think this is a very important question also when you speak about sharing benefits from genetic marine. So I think that the development of a robust legal and regulatory framework for deep sea mining is very, very, very important. It's very challenging. For countries like Haiti, who have not enough resources like for developing scientific research and other methods, so the benefits is the sharing benefits is very important. So I don't have enough thing to say about that, but thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And your time just arrived. Let's start with you, please. What do you think about the prospects of unregulated mining occurring? Can this happen in legal terms, and what problems that could arise? Can you share with us? Unregulated mining. So if you don't regulate and we do that, what do you think will be the results of this?
Can you repeat the question for me, please?
Yes, I can repeat. What do you think about the prospects of unregulated mining occurring? Can this happen? And what problems that could arise from that?
So I think, as I said, that is very important for development countries like Haiti to contribute to developing of the international regulation about this topic. So you can see if I can explain that in French. That should be easily for me in French, because English is not very.
Okay. Someone can share some thoughts about this question, or can. Do you want to translate that? Do you want to translate that if he speaks in French? Well, why not? Well, we have like a French speaker here. Yeah. Thank you, Rafael, for that.
Ouais, si vous voulez reprendre la question en français, if you can repeat the question in French for me.
Okay, just a minute. I will share with Professor Ana Flavia, because I'm not a French speaker. I can just, like a few sentences.
Caroline, yeah.
Pardon? No. I forget you speak French.
This is like the entire, like. This is like, this is a collaborative work. Please, Professor, do you?
qu'est-ce qui se passe si il y a de la minération non régulée, et si ça peut nous arriver en termes juridiques, et quels sont les problèmes qui pourraient advenir de ce cas?
Bon, comme vous le savez, toute société, aussi petite soit-elle, est régie par des lois. Donc, le fonctionnement de la communauté internationale est régi aussi par un ensemble de corpus juridiques qui favorise l'harmonisation dans les relations entre les États.
So, international law is very important. The international community is regulated by international law, which enables the harmonization of the society. I'm trying to translate, I'm sorry, I'm not a professional. And if anyone volunteers, I'd be...
À chaque fois qu'il y a un problème qui préoccupe les sujets du droit international, ça veut dire pas seulement les États, mais aussi les organisations internationales.
When there is a problem that preoccupies the states and other subjects of international law, such as the international organizations.
Donc, il cherche à régler ce problème par le biais du droit, par la formulation des principes juridiques.
They will try to solve this problem using international law and legal principles.
Donc, la question que nous débattons aujourd'hui, c'est un sujet de grande préoccupation, vu les enjeux économiques, les enjeux juridiques et les enjeux politiques.
The questions we are discussing today are a question of international law. If we take into account what is at stake from an economic and legal point of view.
Yeah, donc c'est la raison pour laquelle la question de la régulation demeure importante.
That's why the regulation concerning the sea is important.
Alors ce qui est bien, c'est que dans ce processus, chaque État, petit ou grand, a la possibilité de faire entendre sa voix, de défendre ses intérêts.
And this process, every state, small and big, have the opportunity to have voice in the negotiation process.
Voilà, en ce qui concerne le sujet en débat aujourd'hui, particulièrement qui concerne l'exploitation des ressources génétiques marines, par exemple.
Concerning marine genetic resources exploitation, for example.
L'idée de considérer ces ressources comme, je pourrais dire, un bien commun de l'humanité, c'est un point positif pour aboutir à un partage équitable de ces ressources.
The idea of considering the common heritage of humankind is a good idea to enable, to allow the discussion about sharing of benefits.
Merci.
Merci beaucoup. I know how to say this.
I'm sorry for my translating skills. I'm sorry about that.
Was, Pradeep, do you want to share some thoughts? And thank you.
Yeah, unless someone wants to go first. Yeah? Definitely a topic that I'm very interested in, unregulated mining. Essentially what we're saying is mining taking place in the absence of regulations. So just to be clear on that point. And the convention is very clear that, if we're going to have exploration or exploitation activities, it needs to be in accordance with rules, regulations, and procedures that the ISA will develop, and if you look at Article 137, paragraph 2 of the convention, it's very clear. All mineral resources are vested in humankind as a whole. They can only be alienated in accordance with rules, regulations, and procedures developed by the ISA. And so that's I would say, the paramount rule that applies, that, mining needs to take place only in accordance with these rules, regulations, and procedures. Now, there is this small window of an exception which has come in the 1994 agreement that modified the convention, this provision called the 2-year rule that most of us are familiar with, that provides this narrow window of exception that if the rules, regulations, and procedures are not there and a member state submits a request that the regulations be finalized, then there is this element that comes in that the council has a so-called deadline of 2 years to come up with these rules, regulations, and procedures. And if it's not able to do that, an application still can be submitted for consideration, and the council can decide whether it should be approved or not. And this is very important because if you look at the convention, there's a lot of safeguards. I mentioned 137 and 137 paragraph 2, but there are also provisions in the convention that says that the regulations need to be negotiated and adopted by the council by consensus. You know, and the council is this body of 36 states, and they need to, well, basically none of them need to object to adopting the regulations for them to be adopted. And this, I would argue, is a very strict and ambitious safeguard that was put in the convention. 36 states, they basically all need to say we are happy with the regulations being adopted, and if anyone objects, they cannot be adopted. Mining cannot happen in the absence of regulations. There are also other safeguards in the 1994 agreement that says what the authority needs to have in place before it can approve a plan of work, you know, environmental requirements and so on. You know, so again, you know, initially, yes, there was some threat that unregulated mining could happen, but I think I'm quite encouraged with the decisions taken by the council last year in July 2023, after this so-called deadline expired, where the council basically declared that, you know, commercial exploitation should not commence in the absence of regulation. So sending a strong signal, again, that we do not wish for unregulated mining to happen. And so the question remains now, if an application does come in, how would states react? But I think also very encouraging from the general statements that were made on Monday and Tuesday that many states expressed the view that they are not in favor of approving an application in the absence of regulations. And I think a very final point, you know, I started following the ISA coming in about 2018, 2019, and I remember being in the room in 2019 when the ISA was celebrating their 25th anniversary. We had a lot of high-level statements. The tone was very different back then compared to this year when we are celebrating the 30th anniversary of the ISA, and the messages that, you know, many member states provided was, you know, indeed something that you know, I thought was amazing, you know. And I'm trying to make a comparison of the statements that were delivered by these states in 2019 and the statements that were delivered this year to sort of show that, you know, how much states really care about this potential threat that unregulated mining could happen, and we don't want to see this happen. We need the time. We need to take the time that we need in order to agree on a set of regulations that are acceptable to all and for the benefit of all. Thanks.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. And having this in mind, Tamara, can you share with us who wins and who loses with the beginning of mining activities in unexplored environments? Like thinking about unregulated mining, and let's think about who wins and who loses.
Who wins and who loses with regulated mining?
No, we just share these thoughts, but with unexplored environments. Who will win and who will lose in these unexplored environments?
Did you say unexplored?
Okay, maybe, definitely, maybe I'm not the best chair ever. Okay, but I have some qualities, I'm 100% sure. Thank you. I will say again, and maybe we can translate in Spanish, French, something. Who wins and who loses with the beginning of mining activities in unexplored environments? Yeah.
Very interesting question. I will attempt to respond. So I think as a global community, and may I say that this response will be in my personal capacity, I think as a global community, if mining were to start, there will be winners and losers. And the reason for that is that currently, as everyone has said, you know, we've heard all the scientists talk during the sessions, we heard them talk this morning, there's a lot that hasn't been researched yet, or the baseline data that hasn't been accumulated yet. And so in that regard, I think nature could potentially become a loser, because we would lose some information that hasn't yet, potentially lose some information that has not yet been gathered from a scientific front. And in terms of winners, I think that, you know, both things, losers and winners, it's a different perspective that people take. And so the winners, I think, from the perspective of those who are interested in seabed mining, there would be some sort of movement for them in that direction, and also the availability of something to do research on. And we know right now that some countries have begun deep seabed mining within their national waters. And from that, scientists can look at the positive or negative effects that may be taking place. So very tricky question, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. Someone wants to share? Because I think it's a good one.
Please just allow me to go back to the previous precedent
For
question,
sure, for sure.
About unregulated mining. As I also work with polar geopolitics, polar diplomacy, let's not forget that our countries mining the Arctic region, that's also very fragile, very problematic in different aspects. And there was in the past an attempt to initiate mining activities in Antarctica. It failed. It was kind of blocked by the Madrid Protocol in 1991. It's an environmental protocol, and that's why many countries are trying to block the environmental general policy that was proposed by Chile, from my perspective. So the big weapon to fight unregulated activities is having a general environmental protection rule, and we don't have this in ISA in my analysis. So this is the first point. So and in international relations, anything can happen. So unregulated activities are part of our routine. It always happens. It will happen somehow. If it's not very well regulated, it will happen even faster. So this is the previous question. About this other question, who wins and who loses, please allow me to repeat one idea. We need much more scientific research from a legal and economic perspective combined, because this question is very difficult to answer. We don't know who we are talking to. We know some countries that are interested in mining. We know there are big companies from different countries, my ocean technological powers, but we don't really know the data. We don't have the numbers. We don't know who will win. We don't know who you're talking to. Who will lose? Everyone. So if you think of a legal doctrine or legal concept of the vital interest of humankind, that would enable us to connect with indigenous knowledge, different knowledge systems, different countries' perspectives, the vital interest of humankind. I think this is very important to answer the question, who wins, who loses. For the time being, there's no numbers, as far as I can tell. I wish there were. And then we can have a more pragmatic negotiation. Talks would be totally different, because I suspect that everybody will lose, or the future generations, of course, will lose a lot. So we are violating the principle of sustainable development if we don't pay attention to our obligations towards future generations.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Please, Tamara.
I just wanted to add on that I think it's important. This is emphasizing the need to actually develop those regulations. I know some are very afraid that if the regulations are developed, that it's going to encourage mining from some civil society organizations. But I think this raises the importance of the need to actually develop those regulations while ensuring really robust and strong EIAs that can be monitored. And also, I just wanted to note that, being here in Jamaica at this ISA, we are all very aware of the next steps that are taking place and guided by state parties. And in light of these discussions, one of the most important steps I think that we can all take as a global community is to increase collaboration and build bridges across various relevant areas of knowledge as well as ideas for the purpose of increasing understanding among all of us, so we can understand our different perspectives and work together at the ISA as it seeks to, carry out its mandate. So I think that's really important for us as a global community.
Thank you, Tamara. So for our last round of questions, do you want to share something, G20, do you have some thoughts to address to Brazilian G20 presidency related to deep sea bed mining? Or, please.
I'll just break the ice. As I said, I suggest that we shift the focus from damage to externalities. From a legal perspective, I think this is very important. It's in line with the principle polluter pays, but in the sense that before trying to pollute, they would know precisely that they would pay a lot. And this doesn't exist yet. And we are missing the boat, in my opinion. We're really lagging behind. And it's very important that we have more economic thought. It's a game theory. It's not only economics, also politics. The players will behave according to the rules. So the rules have to be precise, and they have to be very, there will only be commitment and compliance if the great ocean powers or technological ocean powers agree that one will monitor the behavior of others. I'm sorry, I'm talking, it's very different from the United Nations, democratic, everybody has a voice, everybody is important, things like that. In international relations, this is very important to build legitimate architecture. But if the great powers are not with us, our voice is much less important. So we have to have G20 members on board, seriously, to have effective governance.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Je pense que je n'ai pas besoin de traduction parce que je mes notes. Thank you. So I would like to share a lot of recommendations with you about all that we say. I think that the G20 should promote the adoption of strict international standards for deep sea mining, which include a mandatory environmental impact assessment before a project are approved. I think that is very important. The standard should ensure the minimization of ecological impact, the protection of biodiversity, and the prevention of pollution. I think that is a good point. The other point is about the strengthening research and knowledge sharing. I think that in your activity you should encourage and fund international research on the environmental, economic, and social impact of this deep sea mining. You could support, for example, the creation of a global research consortium to facilitate the sharing of data and best practices between members, countries, and scientific institutions. I think that should be very interesting. The other point is about improving transparency and accountability. I think the G20 should work to improve transparency in deep sea mining, this including a strengthening reporting requirement for companies establishing independent monitoring system and increasing the engagement of local communities. So I have a lot of points again. I think that if I can continue, but
sorry.
Yeah.
Actually, we are a bit, like the time. If you don't mind, we can, during the lunch, we can, share more thoughts about what we want and what we want to see in this declaration of G20. Sounds good for you?
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you very much for that. And now I would like to invite the audience to share your thoughts, your questions with us. Please.
Start here. I lost the hand.
Is it working? Yes. Thank you. And thank you to the organizers for putting this very interesting program together. I'm Maria Mendes from the Portuguese delegation, but I don't have my badge today, so I'm speaking on my personal capacity. During the negotiations, there are on the issues of the financial conditions of the contracts. I believe we are always discussing the different models and proposals from a wrong point of view. And by the way, my background is law, so numbers and economics, it's a strange universe. What I see is that we build up these models and we make these calculations starting from the profit of the company, instead of the other way around, building up on the costs and then see how much the contractor should pay. We have tried to consider externalities, and we have tried to evaluate the environmental costs of the activity. But the conclusion, if I understood it well, is that there's no information actually to put a value to those environmental costs. So how do we square this circle where we don't have enough information to put a number on the environmental costs, but at the same time we should use externalities, as you have suggested, as an important element to factor in these calculations of how much the contractor should pay. Thank you.
We have, I saw a hand over here. Your?
It's me? Okay, so first, thank you so much. I think this is brilliant opportunity, and I'm very pleased to have the chance to address you. I know time is an issue, but I could put a lot of questions, but I'll try to summarize. First, I would like to get your thoughts, Pradeep. You have been an observer of the Council several years now. Considering the dynamics you have been watching over the years, what would be your 2 cents if the Council is facing a request for mining upon the 2 years rule and has to take in consideration, that's the language of the law, and take into consideration can lead into many different outcomes. So what is the most probable scenario that you see as an exercise in case the Council is now facing such a request concretely? And Professor Ana Flávia, I have 2 questions. One is regarding, in terms of geopolitics, you mentioned the big powers because you don't have any authority above all and everyone. So the buying of the big technological powers are a very important aspect for the success of any regulatory or in the other way around unregulated activities happening in common areas. So how do you see, from a geopolitical perspective, certain nations, they have very domestic or microeconomic rationale to make a choice for deep sea mining. So I just would like to use an example. For example, in the Micronesia and the Pacific Islands, some of them are in a position based on their geographic position to have more diverse economies. They can count on fisheries, on tourism, eventually on mining and other things. Depending on where you are, fisheries are not your best bet. Maybe your surface area is too small, so mining becomes an opportunity. And this is a very sub-regional or domestic or macroeconomics aspect. How do you see this playing a role in the big scheme of macroeconomics and geopolitics? There is an answer. Are you looking into it somehow? So I will stop here, but hope we can continue the conversation.
Thank you. Last one.
Thank you. Matthew Gianni from the Deep Sea Conservation Coalition, and I've been coming to ISA meetings for about 10 years. Just a couple points. One is that certainly agree with without costing the externalities. You must cost through the externalities, but that's a major challenge. How do you cost the externality of species extinction, not just for ours, but future generations? So that's a really quite strong challenge, strong challenge for the ISA. But just on the economics, if I can run a few numbers by you very quickly to give you a sense that the ISA itself might end up losing money on licensing deep seabed mining. If you take a look at copper today, about $200 billion of copper produced terrestrially each year. If the ISA was to license 5 mining operations and they were to cause a 1% drop in copper, and about half or more of developing states are exporting copper, you're basically looking at $1 billion that the ISA could potentially be liable for in compensation to developing states for loss of income as a result of seabed mining of the same resources. And the same applies to true, the numbers are different, for nickel and cobalt. So there is a plausible scenario where the ISA itself could actually lose money by licensing mining based on the obligations in the convention. But just a final point, Alex, and I mentioned this to you, I think one of the issues that came up in this discussion was the whole issue of governance. And we've seen that happen over last week's council meeting and now this week's council meeting in terms of allegations of improper use of funds in the secretariat and so forth. And I know one of the priorities for the Lula administration, presidency of the G20, is reform or improvement of the international governance system. And we also have on the table a pending decision for an Article 154 review of the ISA. And my recommendation would be if the Brazilian government would like to lead on or really act on concerns over international governance, that it would be helpful to also look at the governance structure of the ISA, promote an Article 154 review, or otherwise get actively involved in that, assuming that the review is agreed this session and is begun by the Assembly. So, thank you.
Thank you. I see no other hands. No? So we go for the last round of discussions, of responses.
I can start first. And picking up from Matt, I think, I absolutely agree. And we recently published a paper led by Professor Rashid Sumaila, which concluded that the ISA would end up losing money, member states would lose money, society as a whole would be losing money if we were to start deep seabed mining right now. And so that point is a very valid point. To come back also to the communique that could come up, I think points like this should be raised about accountability, transparency. We need to introduce reform at the ISA for it to be fit for purpose. And for this, I can only point you to the IUCN Resolution 122, where all these items and components and elements are raised: polluter pays principle, precautionary approach, accountability, reform, and things like that. And so that language would be very useful. Also language in other fora like the CBD, CMS, Convention Conference of Parties, decisions that they've taken, but also the G7 communique, where also deep seabed mining has been raised alongside the European Parliament and Union and so on. So those language would be very useful. Coming to the question from Letizia, I think that would be a very interesting question. The Council has already given quite strong indication, I think, with the decisions last year in July, no commercial exploitation should commence in the absence of regulations. They also decided on a procedure that would apply at least preliminary on what would happen if an application comes in. The Secretary General is required to inform member states within 3 days. And the Council should take it as a matter of priority to determine what are the next steps before the Commission finalizes its review, including the possibility to give directives to the Commission on how to treat an application. So I think the Council has already taken some proactive steps to put a mechanism in place to prevent a situation that it just passes through and comes to the Council for approval. And it gets a little technical, approving an application with regulations and approving an application in the absence of regulations, but a lot of states have already commented on this process through the intersessional dialogue that we had, and summary from that is that the council will look at this very seriously and will not allow it to go through. And I also think that if an application comes in, particularly if it comes in this year or before 2025, I would see more and more states becoming more vocal about the issue, including perhaps calling for a pause or a moratorium because the threat becomes very real that unregulated mining could happen. So even from a legal side of things, there is one reaction, but from a political side of things, there will also be a very interesting reaction to look out for. Yeah, thanks.
Well, for the question about externalities, I think we all agree there's a consensus here that we lack scientific knowledge about the resources, the damages, and even about the technologies that would be used. So we are discussing like in theory, but in the practical terms, we don't have many information that are necessary, vital, to understand what is at stake, first of all. So I really thank you for your question. I think it's a brilliant question that we have to work on. Brilliant, because how do we put a price? How do we change behavior of companies and states that want to mine the deep sea? Do we think that we're going to stop them? I don't think so. We can only change their behavior in terms of making them more sustainable, more responsible. Something that I like to stress in international relations theory, we talk a lot about power, and we talk about the legal scholars to understand about responsibility. And what we're lacking here, in my opinion, in ISA debate is the responsibility to protect. For example, that's a United Nations Security Council concept. Okay, let's apply it to the sea. The responsibility to protect. There's many different ways of fixing a price of a product. We could think of creative ideas. We could ask who are the companies, who are the stakeholders interested in mining activities, and then try to fix a price for them that would be updated, whatever. We could think of the European model as a norm maker or norm shaper with the UODR, for example, deforestation regulation, and just set the rules. The worst case scenario is if we don't do anything about externalities. It's just we're not talking about it enough, and so companies will feel encouraged and states will feel encouraged to go mining. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it's a brilliant question, really. Thank you. I'll think about it to give you a better answer if I find one. About Letitia's question, geopolitics. Again, let's not forget that there are different regimes, including the ocean, the Arctic, Antarctica, mining in land, and we usually have the same concern. It's the same. It's like a game, and geopolitics is always there. So, for example, we could think that countries that are interested in mining now, there are states behind them, big states and small states behind the companies. And what they want from a geopolitical point of view is energy security, or for not only for the batteries, but also for new equipment they will have. We think about chips, but we can think about an axe of competition, hyper competition between the West, one side United States, and the other side China. Hyper competition. And their goal is to be self-sufficient, not rely on energy or minerals from countries that in the future can be rivals. So this is the geopolitical entry point. So just to finish, in theory, there's a framework that I like very much by Johan Pranton and Everly Go from Australian National University. They have the concept of a strategic diplomacy. So you have your end point, your goal, what do you want? And you have the entry points, what do you do? So mining the ocean is an entry point to the goal of energy security or mineral security. I don't know if it's clear. I'm sorry, it's very theoretical, but I'm really happy to share it with you because it enables us to maybe discuss from different perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Tamara, if you want, or when it's scared.
I don't think I have something to add.
Oh,
I think that your explanation was very clear. I don't think I have something to add after your explanation. Thank you.
So just one thing I wanted to add is that I think we all have to recognize that the International Seabed Authority and its mandate was put together and agreed upon by states parties, and barring changing the mandate of the International Seabed Authority, there are potential things that we could consider, such as marine spatial planning. We know that it's an exhaustive process, but aligning all of these various conventions and treaties, we're all talking about one ocean and many different effects and impacts and actions and activities within this one ocean. So if we think about marine spatial planning globally, then marine spatial planning has to consider everything that's happening within certain areas, like within a certain geographical area, which would also include the area, the seabed, the seafloor, and the water column above. And so that's just something that we can, as a global community, also consider when we're thinking about the BBNJ Treaty, ISA, and all other activities that are happening within the ocean. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We are a bit late on our schedule, so I want to thank everyone, especially, my translation into French, but I will be better next time. So thank you very much for the audience to be here with us. It's a pleasure to lead this panel with you all. And during the lunch, we can explore more thoughts and views about economic and legal aspects, and especially about tech transfer, because this is my specialty. So thank you very much for that. And please, Professor.
I go here. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this exciting, fruitful, deep dive into science, into environment, into economics and legal aspects. So we advanced a lot, and now we are going to synthesize the discussions. We recorded it. It will be available later on in the YouTube of the UNESCO Chair for Ocean Sustainability, and so that we can keep going and going deeper into this discussion. We discussed lots of important things that should be captured within the G20 framework and interests, because these countries the G20 was created to bring more resilience for the economic system after some crisis, some global crisis. So deep sea mining has a role in this discussion. So Anna mentioned mineral security, which is a very important aspect. So we need to go for that and deepen this discussion into the G20 realm or framework. So I wrote some words here that I think capture the essence of what we discussed here. More voices. It was mentioned in different moments here today, and this is really important. different voices, not only more voices, different knowledge systems that should be considered and incorporated into the discussions. In a way, this should be secured by a different way of doing things into this international system that we are trying to reform, as we put in our G20 presidency in Brazil. So the reform of the international system is really important to fulfill its role, not to benefit humankind. And perhaps one important comment is related to unregulated mining. So we need to regulate and not allow unregulated mining. So ISA has an important role to organize this interest. And then which kind of science do we still need, or how much science we still need? And there are some pragmatic discussions in the first panel related to heuristic. So doing while we are learning and learning while we are doing in a very responsible way. I think this is very important because this will help us to deal with cumulative impacts, which was one of the questions in the morning, and especially the co-construction of this knowledge so that diplomats, scientists, civil society as a whole will be in the same page in a way to position themselves as being a G20 country or another country, because we are all in the same planet and we all have voices. I think this is the message I would like to synthesize here and say that we will have work after the meeting to prepare a policy brief based on this and share with you so that we can use this later as a base, as a input to the G20 discussions. So I'm extremely happy for being here with you. I think the discussions were fruitful, and now we will nurture again our souls and bodies. We have a list out there. If you could please, if you didn't do it yet, please fulfill this list with your email and your name so that we can reach you after that. Okay? And after doing that, we will find you or we'll meet you again here in the swimming pool, not inside the swimming pool, at the swimming pool, because we will have lunch here and we will have the same menu in the restaurant. So you may choose to have lunch here or there. Okay? So we have options, not options for food, but options for location to eat, okay? So it was a pleasure. Thank you very much, and go on.